So before we jump into the entire presentation, I am the CEO and founder of Early Growth Financial Services. And so what I always tell people is that what we do is not very sexy, but we do it in a very sexy space. So what we do is we're a finance and accounting shop. So same way that Google or Apple or Microsoft has a finance and accounting organization, we provide the same finance and accounting organization to our clients on an outsourced basis. So we do CFO services, we take care of transactional accounting, we do a tremendous amount around taxes, and we do valuation services. But what makes it exciting is that we do it in the venture capital space. And we've got about 20% of the venture capital marketplace. So we support about 650 venture capital-backed clients. We're in 9 cities around the country, and we're by far the largest provider for what we do in this particular technology space. So the markets that we're in the Bay Area. We were started in the Silicon Valley, so Silicon Valley and San Francisco, LA, Seattle, Austin, Boulder, Chicago, and New York. If you take San Diego and Boston out of the equation, we're basically in all the major tech in the country. What our clients tend to look like whatever the VCs are focusing on at any given time. So 7, 8 years ago, it was a lot of clean technology. It was a lot of solar companies. It was a lot of energy efficiency. It was a lot of battery. 4.5, 5 years ago, it was a lot of social media. So we had companies like Clout and Formspring. Today, we're seeing a lot of wearable tech. We're seeing a lot of big data. We're seeing a lot of platform plays. And we're seeing some funky stuff like cannabis and Bitcoin. But it just tends to be whatever the different venture capitalists are looking at and reporting on at any given time. Any questions about sort of who we are or what we do? Does that all make sense? We're accountants. We just do it in a sexy space. Do you want to, Lydia runs New York for us as our market manager. Do you want to introduce yourself, Lydia?
Sure. Thanks everyone for coming today to meet people from Colombia. We have a very strong team here in New York. I think it's our strongest market out of the 9.
She's a little biased.
We also, I think, have the most diverse client base with all the different verticals covered here in New York. So if you have a question, just one-on-one questions, just feel free to email or call, and we'll set up that chat. And more importantly, when questions go through your life cycle. Today is going to talk a lot about doing information planning and fundraising. We have a lot of resources around that, both from just website, but also as an expertise in-house. So if you're ever at a point where you need a pair of eyes or soundboard to go over some topics, we're always happy to help.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to take off this sweater just because it's hot as hell up here, especially with these lights. I apologize. So the big thing, we're going to talk about building your financial projections, and that's sort of the major topic of the day. And there's a lot of different reasons to build a financial projection. A lot of times we have entrepreneurs that come to us and they need it for fundraising. So they're going out to raise money from venture capitalists or from private equity sources, or they're trying to get a bank line of credit or an AR line, and they need to have financial projections pulled together for that due diligence process. And that's very important, but it's also incredibly important to build your financial plan, just as that discipline of having it for your own business is incredibly essential. It really is your way of articulating your strategy and articulating your story of what you want to do and where you want to go as a business. So even if you have this qualitative strategic idea in your mind, having the discipline of actually creating the financial plan and going through and putting out the numbers, it forces you to think about not just your budget, but your timeline and what's possible and what key folks you need to have and what things you need to do. It really is the story of your business. So I would suggest as you're going through and creating your financial plan to think about it in that way. Oh. you know what, I need to plug this in, so which I'll do as we're talking. As I do that, does anyone have any questions about sort of at a high level, either about early growth or about creating your financial plan? It makes sense, right? Yeah.
How many years of projection do you recommend, like, from early stage stuff?
So we're going to talk about what you need to show for a venture capitalist. And the standard has become 3 years. So what you typically would give a venture capitalist is you would give first year 4 quarters, so Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. And then you would do year 2 and year 3. It used to be 5 years. And I think even now there's a bit of, you know, if you're an entrepreneur, you're just starting out your business, there's really no way you're going to know what's going to happen in 3 years. And I think we can all safely assume that your business, if you're doing it effectively and if you're doing the right things, is going to change and it's going to have multiple iterations in those first couple of years. I do still think, even though your business is going to change and have iterations, I think there's some value in thinking out 3 years, because having that kind of strategic foresight, thinking about where do you want to go next. So you know what you're going to do for the next 6, 12 months, but where are you going to go beyond that is an important exercise for you to go through. And plus, if you are raising money, it shows people that you are thinking about that longer term. But for you, for your own budget, if you're just doing it for yourself, I would do a 12-month budget, and then I would think high level where you want to go for year 2 and year 3. So maybe not do the detailed budget, do a detailed budget for 12 months and then beyond that. Unless you have funding, and if you have funding, you want to make sure you budget through until that funding is gone, right? So if you have 18 months of funding, make sure you budget for 18 months so you know what you're going to do for that. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Sorry,
No, don't be sorry.
The early stage a little bit. So what I've found is that the most important metric is burn rate.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Is that going to be part of?
Yeah. So do people understand? So he used the term burn rate. Have people heard the term burn rate before? It's just basically how quickly are you burning through money, right? And when people talk about your burn rate, it's like how much are you burning in any given month, and then how long do you have? What's your burn going to be? So for us, for all of our clients, we have a simplified financial package, and then we have a complicated financial package, depending on what stage our clients are at. But for our early stage clients, the simple financial package is just their 3 financial statements, so cash flow, balance sheet, and income statement, and a burn graph. So that's all we show, those 4 things. But it is incredibly important, right? I mean, cash is king, right? And most of our clients, about a third to a half of our clients have revenue, but almost none of our clients are profitable, just because of this, because of where we live and breathe. But so our clients care about burn deeply. It's deeply, deeply, deeply. So, and burn's also an important metric. If you do have funding and you have raised, you should be thinking about funding again when you're down to 6 months. So if your burn gets down to a 6-month level, you should be thinking about funding again. I have a very good friend who's a venture capitalist. He started the Google of Australia, and then he came over and started a fund called R4 Ventures in the Bay Area. But Mark's a really good friend of mine, and Mark, every time we're on a panel, he says if you're at a startup and you are running out of money and you're 6 months away from running out of money, you need to really start thinking about fundraising, and it needs to be one of your top priorities. If you get to 4 months and you still don't have any money, it needs to be your #1 priority. If you get to 3 months and you still don't have funding, you need to not think about anything else except funding. And if you get to 2 months and you haven't started the fundraising process, you should just close down your business. But it is the type of thing where you do want to think about it far out. So Okay, so building your story with numbers. Do people know who Guy Kawasaki is? Has anyone heard of Guy Kawasaki? So Guy Kawasaki started, he was the first public spokesperson for Apple Computer, and he started GarageVentures.com. He's sort of a very colorful, iconic figure in the Silicon Valley. He's a great speaker. But Guy has written a book. It's called The Art of Start. It's a very simple airplane read. It's like 3 hours. You can also YouTube Art of Start. But it's all about what's the art of starting a business, and what are the things that you need to think about, and what are the things that you need to do. But Guy has this quote just about, this is the story of your business. Building your financial plan is building the financial story. Cool. Okay, so this is kind of what we're going to go through today. But like I said, if you guys have questions, if there's things you want to cover, just raise your hands and we'll go into it, okay? So we talked a little bit before about timeline, right? So how long do you want to have your model? So the venture capital community is asking for 3-year projections. That's become the new standard. That's become the new norm. We'll show you what that...
Is that where if you're seed, Series A,
it's become basically the norm for all of the different stages until you get to the DE stages when you're starting to think about going public. Then it's a whole different discussion, right? Then it's a whole different approach. It's a whole different way of going after it. But it's funny, venture capitalists, VCs have been around for over 30 years at this point, and they've been investing for a long, long time. It's become very standard what they want to see. So we do another presentation that's on fundraising, and it's all about, here are the slides you need for fundraising, and here's the process that you need to go through, and here are the things that you need to have ready. But it's become dictated what you need to have for a venture capitalist. You need to have either 10 to 12 slides. We know exactly what those slides are. We know what information you need to cover. We know how that information needs to look. You get penalized for not complying with their requirements. So that 3-year model, yes, it needs to be 3 years and it needs to look in a certain way, and they're kind of jerks about it. So, but yes, the answer is yes. Okay, so 3-year model. I think, there's no way you're going to go 6 to 9 months without changing your model and changing it drastically. But having that process of thinking longer term, I think, is really useful. Okay. So when you think about your model, the way I like to think about it is before you even put anything down on paper, before you even commit anything to paper, you sit back and you think at a high level, what are you trying to achieve? What's your business trying to do? What are the major objectives that you have? Just high level, don't quantitate it at all, but high level, what do you want to do? And then once you have that overall high level objective, think about what are the real obtainable milestones that you need to put in place. What are the things that you want to do, and what are the concrete milestones that you need to achieve? Now, if you're raising funding, this is when you should be doing milestone financing and thinking about milestone funding. Do people understand the term milestone funding? Have people heard that before? Milestone funding I've written a couple different blogs on it, and you can go to our site, and there's a bunch of blogs on it. But milestone funding is the idea that every time you raise a round of funding, you want that round to be at a higher level. So you want to have what they call an up round every time you raise money, which it just means you raise money at a higher valuation. Very, very straightforward, right? But what that means is that if you raise money, when you raise that money, you need to understand what items you need to accomplish to ensure that the next time you raise money, you will do it at a higher valuation. So let's say I bring in $2 million for a seed round, and I know that that money's going to last me 18 months. I need to understand what are the key things I need to achieve with that money to make sure the next time I go out and raise, I'm worth more. So maybe it's developing a beta product. Maybe it's opening a new market. Maybe it's having your first clients. Maybe it's having your first revenue. But if you are in a fundraising mode, If you are in a process where you don't have revenue and you need money in order to scale, if you're building a business for scale and you're raising outside funds, milestone fundraising is a key part of your financial planning process, because you want to make sure every time you raise money, you hit key deliverables with that money so that you can raise money at a higher value. So you think about your major objectives, then you think about your milestones. What are the key milestones that you need to hit? And then what are the assumptions that you have? And an assumption is, okay, if my milestone is that I need to build a beta product, then there's some assumptions there in terms of what do you need in terms of resources to develop that process. You know, maybe you can make some assumptions about, okay, I can hire some engineers to do it. Or maybe you're gonna outsource your engineering and you're gonna do it in the Philippines or in India or Eastern Europe. But what are the assumptions that go into all that different thing, go into those different milestone creation hits? If you've been around for a while, if you have some historical knowledge, absolutely this should be pulled in at this point in time. So if you've been running for 6 months or a year, if you've already got employees that are on salary that you're paying, if you've already got revenue coming in, if you've already got contractors that you're paying on a recurring basis, pull all that. Guys, we've got really good food. Grab some food. Grab yourself a plate and like get comfy. But the what was I saying? Oh, trending analysis. Yeah, I mean, if you have historical stuff, you just want to pull that into your budget, right? So I mean, if you know what you're spending, you want to obviously pull that in. When you're doing your budget, you want to be very careful though. If you have historical knowledge, you do want to pull that in. If you know what your salaries are or your contractor costs are, absolutely pull that in. But you don't want to do a trending budget. And what I mean by a trending budget is you don't want to say, hey, I had $100,000 in revenue in 2014, and I think my revenue is going to grow by 25%, so it'll be $125,000 next year. You want to be able to make sure that all of your assumptions are grounded in some type of a fact. So when you think about your revenue, don't just say, I think I will grow my revenue by this amount. Think about, okay, how am I going to generate revenue? Do I have a direct sales model? And if I have a direct sales model, what's it going to cost me to hire a salesperson? What's the ramp up time for that salesperson? Is it going to take 3 months or 6 months before they start selling? And then what do I think they're going to be able to sell on a monthly basis? Build that assumption. If you're saying, I'm going to get my business through SEO and SEM, then what are you paying? What are you spending on Google AdWords on a monthly basis? What do you think your conversion rate's going to be? What do you think? And think through all of those key assumptions. So when you build the budget, don't just say, hey, I'm going to have this type of growth, but these are the actual things that you're going to be doing in terms of hiring people or in terms of generating revenue. And think about it from that perspective. Does that make sense? Do we get that? Any questions on that? Okay. Okay, we talked a little bit about the major objectives and figuring it out.
Sure, one question. So if you do it this way, how do you come up with your major objective? Let's say like I want to hit 1 million revenue the next year. Or how do you have to start somewhere to calculate it back. And if you don't want to assume a growth rate, you have to hit a milestone. But how do you?
So you want to have milestones, right? So you think about what are your key milestones, right? So if your key milestone, let's say it is hitting $1 million, right? So if you say, I want to hit $1 million in revenue, and you got to kind of think about what does that mean, right? Does that mean you want to do $120,000 a month in recurring revenue? Is that, sort of what? So you'll say, okay, I want to get to $120,000 in recurring revenue by December of 2016. Well, then what are the steps that you need to put in place in order to do that, right? So who do you need to hire? Do you have a direct sales model? So does that mean you need to hire 5 people right now? Does that mean you need to hire 3 people by June? Does that mean you need to do X amount of an investment in, your social online media strategy? But that's okay to have as a milestone. But once you have that as a milestone, then you got to work back and figure out what are the concrete things that you need to do in order to get there. So I have no problem having a revenue target, but then give me concrete things to get there. Don't just say, hey, in order to get to $1 million, I need to 50,000 this month, 60,000 next month. You know, don't just put in the numbers. Tell me how you're going to do that, because they're going to dive into it. And most of these fuckers are MBAs, right? And all they're going to want to do is dive into your numbers. It's the one area that they're going to be able to speak to in your pitch deck, right? It is, right? They all came right out of Harvard. At least they're a little more diverse than they used to be. Other questions before we move on? Yeah.
Can you guys see these slides? Like,
Yeah, we can definitely.
I think Mary sent around, but I'll make sure.
Yeah, we absolutely share it, and Haley will do it typically, but if she doesn't, Lydia will do it. But yeah, why don't you just do a sign-up sheet, and then you know what? We can also send them. We'll put on Mark's webinar too, because we're going to cover that in a second. Okay, so if you have a team, so a lot of you are probably in a situation where it's you and a co-founder, but if you've been around for a while and you have a team and you all have areas that you're responsible for, so if you've got a CTO, you've got a sales guy, you've got a head of engineering, you've got an operations guy, if you're a little bit farther along, you want to make sure that you bring your key stakeholders into this discussion. So the way that that would happen is you would all sit down together and you would agree on your big objectives and your milestones. So like, let's say, hey, we want to get to that $1 million. And then everybody would go off and they would think about, okay, if these are the milestones and the objectives that we've all agreed on, what do I need, or what does my team need to have in place in order to achieve that? And obviously there's going to be different things for engineering, operations, sales, marketing, and general and administrative. You would all come back together, and then there'd be a discussion. And there's a lot of horse trading that happens at this point in time, because invariably there's too many requests, there's too many things that people want, and there's not going to be enough resources. And so there's going to be some trade-offs. So there's going to be some give and take. Well, so maybe we can't open up New Mexico this year. Maybe that's got to wait until 2 years from now. Maybe we don't do, maybe we don't do this version of the product until later. Maybe we come out with mobile in 2017, right? And you make trade-offs during this point in time. But the more people that you have that are stakeholders, it's actually much better, because if you have stakeholders, they know their area, they can really concentrate on it. You don't need to be a sales expert, a marketing expert, an engineering expert, and an operational expert. Obviously, the farther along you are, the more you can bring in that expertise. And they should really be able to help and collaborate with this budget process. And we talked a little bit about this, but for presenting to venture capitalists, there's 2 slides that you need from a financial perspective. The first is the bottoms-up forecast that we talked quite a bit about, and that's just 3 years. First year is 4 quarters, just Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4, and then year 2 and year 3. What I just asked Lydia, why she's going to get all of your, and Lydia, did we start that? Did we start the sign-in sheet? Okay. So the guy that I was talking about earlier, Mark Phillips, who's a good friend of mine. So Mark wrote this book, The Inside Guide to the Silicon Valley: How the Deal Gets Done. And he talks about how to raise money in the book. And in both Guy Kawasaki's book and in Mark Phillips' book, they talk about what you need to have pulled together to raise money. And you need 3 things. You need an executive summary, you need, which is a 1 or 2 page document. You need an elevator pitch, which is a 1-paragraph overview of your business. And then you need a pitch deck that's 10 to 12 slides. And both Guy Kawasaki and Mark Phillips talk in detail about what needs to be contained in your pitch. And Mark actually does a chapter on every slide in your pitch deck. And he came in, he's done a bunch of webinars with us where he goes through the pitch deck, and he actually goes through each slide in the pitch deck and talks about what should be on there. And then he gives examples. So when we send out this presentation to all of you guys, that'd be useful? Yeah? People want Marks? Yeah. Yeah, it's fucking useful, right? And it's got all the different slides. So first one is the bottoms up. So that'll be in there. The second one Oh, yeah. So this presentation talks about, okay, so the bottom-up financial projection, what you need, and then it talks about the different spends. The big thing for your bottoms-up projection is really understand your assumptions, right? Because what's going to happen is someone's going to point to your engineering line item, and they're going to say, what's in that line item? And you need to be able to say, I've got a CTO in that line item, I've got 2 software architects, and I've got a team in Poland that I'm paying $15,000 a month to. You need to be able to answer every question. So that's the big thing on this slide, okay? We talked about budgeting exercises, so you have how you sort of go around. And then the other big slide that you need if you're raising money is your tops-down projection. And this is a bit of a bullshit slide, but it's really essential. So everyone kind of understands how the venture capital marketplace works, right? So the venture capital investment thesis is that they're going to make 10 investments. 5 of those investments are going to totally fail. Just completely fail. Those companies aren't going anywhere. 2 or 3 of those investments are going to be break even. They might have a little bit of a return. And then they have 1 or 2 investments that are huge home runs, where they just knock it out of the park. But what that means is that every time a venture capitalist is looking at your business, they're not looking at whether or not you have a good business. You know, there's an assumption that you probably have a good business or that you can create a good business. What they're looking for is there a huge market opportunity? Can they have plus 10x returns on this opportunity? And that's what this slide is. It's just how big is the market opportunity? What's the market look like? And so it's typically, so an example would be, let's say I have a new ultrasound machine for pregnant women. So I would say the overall radiology marketplace in the world is 30 billion. The ultrasound marketplace in the world is 5 billion. The ultrasound market for pregnant women is 1 billion. I'm starting in the United States, which is $500 million, right? And that's kind of what this slide would look like. Typically, it's pulled from industry analysts, so like IDC, DataQuest, Gartner Group, or just from the web, information on the web. Or if it's a brand new business, then you need to figure out a way of coming up with what you think the market size would be. So Uber, obviously, Uber probably looked at taxis and limo services when they were looking at their overall marketplace. But you need to try and figure out a way to do it. And the reason that they have this slide is just to figure out whether or not it's a market that they give a shit about. The example that I always like to use on this one is we've got a client called Pacer Pro. And Pacer Pro's up in San Francisco. They're up in the Embarcadero in San Francisco. And they've got a legal database. They've created a legal database, and they've raised like $12 million in funding. And when I first sat down with them, I was like, how the hell did you guys get $12 million in funding for a legal database? Well, it turns out that the legal database marketplace is a $13 billion marketplace. So legal law firms all over the world pay $13 billion to have access to these legal databases, and there's only 2 players in the space. So, I mean, Pacer Pro has a market opportunity. There's a large market opportunity there. So that's what goes into that slide. Does that make sense? Bottoms up, tops down. We'll send you out, when we send out our deck, we'll also send out Mark's webinar so you can see each of the different slides. Yeah.
How big should this market, like the overall and the addressable sort of market, be to be attractive?
Yeah, it's got to be over $1 billion.
Over $1 billion.
Yeah, it's got to be over $1 billion, right? So, and I mean, is any market really going to be that? But I mean, make sure that I would figure out a way to get yourself to 2 to 3 billion, okay? And you can say, I mean, you can very much say, hey, I'm going to focus on this segment first, and this segment here, it's only 250 million, but it's going to get me all sort of the sales chops and get me what I need to do to get into this market, and this market's much larger, right? But you want to be able, this is the slide where you want to be able to say, hey, look, even if I just get 0.5% of this entire market, I'm still going to be rich, right? This is the slide that you want to make that statement on. Cool? Okay. when I started the talk, I said that this should really be a tool, right? So obviously we need to have a financial forecast in order to raise money, in order to get equity, in order to get debt, in order to do a lot of different things. But you all as CEOs and founders, this is a huge tool for you just in terms of running your business. If you have a budget, you don't need to constantly think about making decisions. Like, I get so sick of making decisions constantly. I feel like people ask me to make decisions all day, every day. Having a budget allows you to communicate to your team and to your entire organization, this is what we're gonna do. These are the decisions we've already made. Let's adhere to it. It gives you a scorecard on a continual basis. So you have, your budget is where you wanted to go, so you can measure yourself against your budget on a regular basis to see how you're doing. Budget versus actual analysis is something that almost every finance department in the world does, right? So it's your way of measuring your scorecard. It's also your way of making sure that your team, your executive team, is aligned and you all are marching in the same direction. And it's also a tool when you do need to change, when you do need to make an adjustment, it's a good tool to use to think through those changes and those adjustments. Hey, this isn't working. This strategy is not working. We need to close down Milwaukee. It's been a terrible market for us. What do we want to do instead? Well, what can we afford? You know, how much are we paying our team in Milwaukee? If we close it down, what will it cost? What are our startup costs going to be in some other market? But it's a way to think through what you're doing. You want to get into a habit of reforecasting, which means updating your budget. How often you're reforecasting and how often you're updating it really depends on how much it's changing, right? I mean, if there's 4 of you and you're coding in a WeWorks, you know, and you're going to be coding for the next 7 or 8 months, you don't need to update your budget, right? If some new expense comes in that you know, hey, we spent $40,000 we weren't planning on spending, you know, make sure you capture that. But let your reforecasting timeline or schedule be based on how things are changing and how fluid things are. But do use this as your tool, right? It's just another thing for your pocket. Questions on that, reforecasting?
So could you just, when you talked about the scorecard aspects in the budget, in terms of like how you're mapping that against whatever revenues that you have, or how you're mapping that against sort of like your milestone goals that you mentioned before, right? Is that kind of how you were talking about how we can use it as a scorecard?
You can use it, well, I mean, just a couple different ways. So your milestone goals, right? So, hey, look, we were planning on having this much revenue by this amount of time. Or, hey, we had budgeted to have our beta product happen then. So that's absolutely, you can measure it against those milestones to see how you're doing. But just, hey, are you spending more money than you thought you would? Right. You know, is your burn rate going to be greater than it would be? I mean, so our burn chart, were you the one that asked, who had asked about the, so our burn chart, it shows, it's a really, really simple graph. But all it is it's on the left axis, how much money you have, and on the right, it's time. And it's just, what's the original budget of when you're going to run out of money, and then what's the new forecast. It's 2 lines. It's all about when do you run out of cash, how many months you have. But so that's the most important scorecard you have, right? I mean, how long can I fucking live, right? So this is our last slide, but are there other questions? Did I kind of cover what you guys wanted? Was this useful? Do I have other questions that people have? We do a presentation on fundraising, one on financial forecasting, one on building your accounting infrastructure, and one on setting up your business. So those are sort of the 4 standards that we do. And I think we're coming into Columbia a couple times a year, I think, at this point.
What are some like important key metrics that investors care about? I mean, outside of obviously revenue and whatnot, key drivers, or is it retention rates, or
retention and customer acquisition, I think are really the big ones. You know, so what does it cost to acquire a new customer, and what are your retention rates? You know, and at this point, the venture capital community is really looking for any kind of traction that you have. And so when you think about that, don't just say, okay, like I don't have revenue yet, or I don't have clients yet. But what other traction do you have, right? I mean, so what are the other things that you can talk about? Do you have some people that are beta testing your, you know, do you have downloads, or how many people are using it? You know, things like that.
Yeah, you were saying about the overall market share, and they'd love to see that, you know, 0.01% of that. But is there another number, a qualitative number that they want to see, like, in terms of 10 times the EBITDA, or you know what I mean? Like, are they looking?
You know, it's funny, right? So, I mean, so I've got an MBA. Probably half the people in this room have an MBA, right? And we learn all this stuff about like net present value and IRR and all this stuff about discounted cash flows, where we're actually calculating what's the value, you know, you can get to a real value for your company. That's all worthless. Like, they don't care about any of that, right? Here, I mean, tuition. So they care about the overall. Well, I mean, the biggest reason you're paying your tuition is for your network, right? I mean, that's the biggest. I mean, and Columbia's. I mean, that's golden. I'd pay your tuition, right? I mean, there's a good ROI on a Columbia education. But what was I saying? Oh, the things that they give a shit about. They give a shit about the market size, and then they care if the space is hot. You know, and it's funny, but you know, we think about venture capitalists as being sort of these far-sighted folks that have all this strategic insight into what's going to happen, and they're seeing what's going to go on in the future. And that's really not the case. I mean, there's a couple of them that are really good. But there's a lot of venture capitalists that don't have any vision at all, and they move in packs. They're fast followers, right? So someone will be like, "Hey, wearable tech is going to be the future," and then everybody jumps into wearable tech, and it really goes like that. And then there'll be a bunch of money that gets in there, and then there'll be a couple failures, and everyone will move on to the next big thing. So the things that they care about are overall market size, whether or not you've got a team that can execute, and whether or not the space is hot. Which is, you know, we had all these hot solar companies that were so overvalued for years, and now, you know, our solar companies can't get anything.
Right. So, in terms of like raising, say, seed to Series A, Series B, I mean, should the seed come from friends and family and your own savings? Is it that, you know, is there?
Yeah. So we talk about, in our fundraising presentation, we talk about who you raise from at different stages. So seed investing used to be very analogous to a friends and family round. Seed rounds have gotten much larger. So we're seeing seed rounds now that are anywhere from $500,000 to $2 million. So they're much more institutional rounds. So I think the friends and family round is exactly what it sounds like. It's money you raise from people you know. But typically the seed round, you're going to raise it from angel groups, but also from micro VCs. So, and in New York, you've got great angel groups and great micro VCs. So, and try and do it as a convertible note if you can, right? Instead of a price round. Did you have a?
Yeah, I did. So to that point, do they want to see competitors in the space that are doing something similar, but not exactly the same?
You know, I mean, if it's a hot, I mean, you know, the answer is yes. It shouldn't be, right? I mean, they should be excited about you if no one else is doing it. Right. But, you know, they do tend to move in packs. So if there's other folks that are out there, I mean, they would never, ever say that to you. You're never going to get a venture capitalist that says, hey, I want to see competitors in the space. But it certainly gives them more comfort. Hey, Kleiner just invested in one of these, and we think we've got, you know, a better idea with a better CEO and a better app, you know. But things get hot.
At the seed stage, so referring to angel groups and the micro VCs, what's the minimum amount of runway they'd be looking for in a seed investment?
So how much would they put in?
Like, if they put in $500,000, then they want to know that it'll last.
Oh, what's the runway going to be?
X amount of months, what is that?
Yeah, so they don't have, so it's much more about the milestones. So the question will be, okay, so if I put in $500,000, what can you achieve with this? So it won't be how long will you be around, but it'll be what are the key deliverables that you can get to. So instead,
The equity investment, they want to know that it'll get you to the equity round.
yeah, they want to know that they're going to get to a higher valuation round. They want to know that if they give you this money, you will be able to accomplish some key things so that you can raise more money at a higher value.
And what do you think a reasonable rule of thumb would be for raising a seed round in terms of, you know, how long do you need it to last?
Well, I think it depends on what are the milestones. So I think you would want to look at what are the key things that you're doing, right? So like, you know, is it a beta? Is it revenue? Is it first customer? Is it opening up a new market? Is it certain hires? But I would tie it to certain things that would create an increased value. And you can have that conversation, right? I mean, you can say, look, this is what I want to raise $500,000, and here are the things I want to do with that. You know, do you think that that's appropriate? Do you think that that's enough? Do you think that that gets me far enough? And if I did this, would you do a follow-on? Is this a kind of, you know, would you reward this behavior with more money? And so you have that conversation.
Like from your experience, what are like common flaws when you see these financial models? Like for instance, you just get the numbers and you look at it and like that's not possible. As I say,
yeah,
you want to use
the bullshit factor. Yeah, the bullshit factor is the biggest flaw. The bullshit factor, and then when you dig in, not having details, right? Not being able to say, look, I can disagree with your assumptions, but I want you to at least have assumptions that you've thought through, right? And then we can have a conversation about, there's no way you're going to have that kind of conversion rate, right? You're not going to have 5%. We've never seen higher than 1.5%. Or, you know, you're not going to have your sales team, your new sales guy isn't going to be able to deliver $50,000 a month one. It's going to take them at least 6 months to get there. I mean, you want to, you know, being able to you want to be able to have that details. The biggest flaw is not having the details, compounded with just this ridiculous hockey stick, right? And they expect the hockey stick, but at least be able to fight for it.
So what's like a typical, like, let's say, revenue growth? I mean, if you can say this.
You know, I think the biggest thing for you guys nowadays is you want to be able to show some traction quickly. So it's not a ton of revenue. It's more important to getting to revenue quickly. That's the biggest thing right now, right? So the path to initial revenue, the shorter you can make it, the better off you're going to be. And then be in a hot space.
How many pack leaders, PC pack leaders, do you think there are?
Oh, you know, I think there's probably different pack leaders in each market, right? So,
are we talking like, let's say we're talking about, so I'm not in the tech field, but let's say biotech, like.
Yeah, so there's 20 VC firms that they treat as the type A venture capital firms, right? And they're the Kleiner Perkins and the Battery and the Mayfields of the world. You know, and each of those firms sort of have their luminaries. And I would say the direction of the venture market follows those folks. You know, it's Andreessen Horowitz, it's Vinod Khosla. I think that there's some people at the early stage that are pushing the direction of seed investing, people like Ron Conway and Dave McClure and Paige Craig.
So you're talking 80 to 100 people?
Yeah, 80 to 100 people. And they all tend to move together. There are some real visionaries, right? I mean, Vinod Khosla and Andreessen Horowitz are visionary, right? You know, there are visionaries that are out there, but most of the venture capitalists that you meet and pitch to aren't visionaries. Most of them are white Aryan guys that just graduated from Harvard, you know, like 3 years before that, you know, hopefully they're not going to be arrogant. So, it's true, right?
Where do you usually find them?
Where do you usually find them? So when you're looking for venture capitalists, I mean, so it's a sales process, right? So you want to give yourself a long period of time, and you want to create a sales plan, just like you would create a sales plan for going after any other market. And the way that you want to approach it is you want to figure out, you start by making a list of all the different venture capitalists that you want to go after. Who focuses on your industry? Who focuses at your size? Right? So your stage, you're raising at a seed or at A. Who focuses there? And then regions, because, you know, there's New York VCs, there's Bay Area VCs. Some people look across the country, some people don't. But you pull together that list. And so you have all the different venture capital firms you want to go after, and then all the different individuals that you want to target. And then it's a networking game, right? So this is a great opportunity, right? So you're surrounded by a lot of wonderful, wonderful entrepreneurs, right? So they've obviously met with different venture capitalists and know different VCs. See other entrepreneurs, who they know and what they look like. When you pull together your advisory board for your company, you want to have people that have expertise in what you're doing and technology expertise and maybe some sales and marketing expertise, but you also want to pull together advisors that can introduce you to venture capitalists and who are in that network. When you think about your professional service providers, you want to think about professional service providers that can help you in that way. Lawyers are expensive as hell. Lawyers cost $700, $800 an hour. They're going to cost $700, $800 an hour regardless of which lawyer you choose. All of you are going to need to be incorporated. All of you are going to need to have some legal work done to get your business started. So if I were you, I would make sure that you pick a lawyer that can also introduce you to a ton of venture capitalists, because you're going to be paying them a shitload of money anyway. Same thing with banks. Y'all are going to need a bank. There's certain banks like Silicon Valley Bank and Square One Bank where they can make a bunch of intros for you. There's other banks like Chase and Chase and Wells Fargo that they're not going to help you at all. So that's the other area. So think about your service providers. So networking with other entrepreneurs, service providers, your advisory board, going to events, building your network that way. And also, I mean, frankly, thinking about incubators and accelerators. So I think for the most part, incubators and accelerators are a mistake. I think they take a big slice of equity and you don't get much in return. I think the judgment of a good incubator or accelerator program is what percentage of their companies get funding when they graduate. But if you can go to a good program, one where a large percentage of the companies that are going through the program are getting funding, that can be really good as well. So, and Blueprint Health does a good job over here in Soho, but I'm a big backer of Y Combinator, and there's a couple other programs. I mean, I would spend Columbia. I would leverage the shit out of this relationship, right? I mean, Columbia is a big time school with a great entrepreneurial program, right? And they're helping you guys, right? I mean, they're doing everything they can for you. I mean, it's a great program. I mean, utilize that. Other questions? Yeah.
Can you speak to the issue of finder's fees? In terms of having people help you get the easy cash? Yeah.
We avoid it, right? So finder's fees, so it's like an investment banker fee or a brokerage fee. There's lots of different shapes and sizes. So first of all, most of the people that are charging finder's fees are breaking the law, right? So they don't have their broker-dealer license, so they shouldn't be doing it. So it's illegal to do it. So you need to be careful about that. Venture capitalists have a huge issue with it. So they, especially at the earlier stage, at the seed and the Series A's, they've got an issue with it. And see, I just don't think many of those guys are that strong. I don't think that they do a very good job. So if you're raising a larger round, if you're raising a round above 20 million, I think that it makes sense a lot of times to utilize an investment banker. And I think there's good folks that are out there. There's boutique shops. But a finder's fee, I just wouldn't pay it. I would use your entrepreneurial network, use your service providers, use your advisory board network.
One question regarding the advisory board. How do you compensate when you're building your advisory board? Do you offer them equity or just being part of the project they like?
A lot of times equity. So a lot of times it'll be a small grant. So it'll be like 25 to 30 points over 2 or 3 years. So it's a little piece of equity. A lot of times they're doing it for love, but it's a little piece of equity.
Can I throw in a couple comments and ask a question?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, you might disagree, and if you do, tell me.
Oh, yeah, totally.
In New York, there's a really good venture capitalist, Fred Wilson, who likes to blog at EC.blog.
I love Fred, yeah. He's great.
And he's got a back issues of MBA Mondays that covers maybe more detail, but some of the things you're talking about. A former partner of his is Fred, who wrote a book. Later on, he won about term sheets and things of that nature. It turns out that, back to Fred, if you're a woman and you want venture capital help, his wife goes by Gotham Doll, I think. She has a special helping assistance with women who are doing startups. So,
both of those are both great. Those are even big thumbs up on both of those names. But also, if you're a woman, and there's a couple women in here, there are more resources for you.
Or
so,
no other woman yet.
Yeah.
Or guys that know women, that are doing it.
If you're a woman and you're an entrepreneur, you've got an easier route. But there's a couple different organizations information is the key into. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. Continue,
And
please.
there's also Steve Blank, who at times teaches at Columbia.
Yep.
He's put off out west, and he's got a blog called steveblank.com. He's got a couple books. Again, this might be part of the document.
No, I think that's great.
Resource stuff.
This is a great ecosystem. New York is a great, great ecosystem. It's a vibrant ecosystem. You guys have got a very active investor community. There's not a lot of arrogance here. It's a really good ecosystem. You guys are in a good place.
Do you recommend any firms that do business plans or maybe look over your numbers and
Not really. I mean, when you're ready to engage with the CFO, I mean, I would hope you would call Lydia and I. But, you know, in terms of building your business plan, I mean, you don't want to outsource it, right? It's something that you need to think through, right? It's your story, right? You got to think through it. I mean, in terms of pulling it together, you can always just grab some MBA to do some Excel work for you for 5 or 6 hours. But like the mechanics of exactly who do you need to hire and when do you need to hire them and how are you going to generate revenue? Like that's a thought process you want to go through.
Can I just tell you? Well, my name is Gladys Carroll for Columbia SBDC.
Oh, okay, good.
The Small Business Development Center.
Awesome. Okay.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that because you have asked to help you with the planning of your business. And not only that, but also to facilitate attorneys and also about access to capital because sometimes the first layer of funding comes from you, from yourself, family members, and then going to venture capital. So if our services are free, by the way. Okay? So you have access to resources.
If there's people in this room that have a Columbia affiliation that are not living at the Entrepreneurship Center, you're making a major error, right? I mean, Columbia is doing a lot of shit to help its folks, and it's one of my favorite entrepreneur programs in the country. It's one of my top 5 favorite, I think. Do we have to go? Oh, I have a CFO call. Okay. Oh shit. I'm sorry. I have to go. So we'll send all this out. So thank you. Thank you very much.